Yo, what's going on everybody? Jigan here, and we are finally back with more One Piece content. I know it's been a while, but had a lot on my plate this last month, and I'm sure a lot of you guys did as well. But, I had to come back for the Zoro hype in this chapter, and I'm ready to start pumping out more videos on the regular again. So let's get straight into it. The chapter starts with Sanji, which leaves off from the cliffhanger we had last chapter, and it looks like he's attempting to save a beautiful woman who's being sexually harassed. And as he breaks in, it turns out that it was actually a trap by Black Maria's henchmen or henchwoman, whatever you want to call them, and they had planned it. They had seen Sanji's wanted poster, so I guess they kind of knew he was susceptible to this kind of tactic. And a lot of people have been calling this, I guess, the Khalifa 2.0, referring back to Eni's lobby when Khalifa kind of beat the shit out of him before he ended up fighting Jabra. And I guess I can see that. I can definitely see a similar situation to that where Sanji still finds his way to Queen even after getting beat by Black Maria. I'm just pretty damn sold on the matchup, especially when you look back to last chapter when Queen literally talks about Vince Mo Judge. I just feel like that's a very weird dialogue to have if it wasn't going to mean anything. If Queen doesn't have some sort of connection to Judge, whether they go back and it's a super important connection, or whether it's something small like he's just a Judge fanboy or whatever. Like, couldn't you definitely see Oda doing something like that? Because a couple of times when we've seen him transform into Stealth Black using the raid suit, we've seen various people comment on it and kind of fanboy over it, like X Drake, and even Law commented on how he was a fan growing up in the North Blue. So I could definitely see Queen being like a Vince Smoke Judge, like scientist fanboy, and that would kind of just like piss Sanji off. So I could see Oda making it kind of like a minor gag like that, or maybe he wants to dig deep and have some sort of strong narrative connection dating way back or whatever. So whatever he decides to do, I'm pretty sure that this matchup is going to happen still. Another thing to bring up is that Chopper literally says later in the chapter that fire melting is the key to defeating the ice demons, the ice Onis that Queen has started. So Sanji could potentially help out Chopper with that plague while he's preparing the antidote. Sanji could use Diable Jambre to help cure the people of the plague. Elsewhere on the third floor, you see Luffy and Jinbe attempting to ascend up to the fourth floor, while also being introduced to a couple new gifters who comment on Luffy's bounty and continue to just do like the usual fodder stuff we've been seeing from these gifters. I think the reason Jinbe has continued to stick with Luffy the longest is because we are due for an eventual Big Mom confrontation. We see in the next sequence that Big Mom is actually jumping straight up through the hole that Kaido created. And I think Jinbe needs to be there for when Big Mom eventually intercepts Luffy. I don't know if she's going to fight Luffy before he fights Kaido, or if she's going to get there at the same exact time that Luffy confronts Kaido, but I'm pretty damn sure we're going to get a Big Mom and Jinbe fully fleshed out dialogue. I know they had a quick confrontation earlier on the first floor when Jinbe kind of flipped her out of the scene for a little bit, but I think we are due for an extended dialogue with Big Mom and Jinbe, and Luffy hopefully will overhear this. What I'm thinking, what I've gone on the record of saying, is that something potentially happened to the Sun Pirates, that Jinbe wasn't telling the whole story because he didn't want to decrease morale before the raid. So I definitely think the possibility is there for something like that, and I do think overall that Jinbe will just be a contributor in the Big Mom fight. So heading back to the live floor, down beneath the dome, we see Zoro, and he's looking up, sees Big Mom go through the roof through the same exact hole that Kaido made, and you see like a little dot, and as we find out later in the chapter, that turns out to be Kiku's arm. And that instantly flips a switch with Zoro, because remember, back in Act 1, Kiku was actually the first scabbard that Zoro had met on Wano. Kiku was the one who was traveling with them in Bakura Town, as well as helped bandage up Zoro from the fight with Hawkins. So you can definitely tell seeing the arm fall down really hits for Zoro. And then as soon as we saw him get serious, we saw what happened, man. That one shot. And I know it's not a one shot in the traditional sense. It wasn't like a pure 1v1. They were kind of tag teaming him a bit, but still, you gotta admit this was very impressive to see him flip the switch like that, and Drake's reaction, I think, kind of really solidifies that. And overall, it's pretty crazy how many interactions and encounters Oda has given Zoro to other Worst Generation members. We know he clashed with Hawkins back in Act 1, he defeated Killer in Act 2, and now he's the one who's actually finishing off Apu when most people probably guessed it would have been Kid, based on their history, based on Apu betraying him and Kid taking that personally. But let's also talk about the art in this shot, man, because that shading was cold. Oda hasn't really given Zoro a detailed panel like this in a long time where the shading just makes him look cold as hell. And the next scene is one of my favorite aspects of this character, and it's the fact that he's able to convey so many different emotions while keeping the tone very consistent. When Kiku's arm fell, that cool, calm, and collected rage just instantly felt natural, and then the next scene with Chopper, he's able to have a wholesome brotherly moment with him where he also shows a great deal of trust in him. And then once again, he's able to flip that switch as soon as Queen starts to fire at them. He sends a no-name slash attack that cuts his machine gun in half, as well as scaring Queen pretty badly. So the portrayal here for Zoro has really been excellent, honestly. Like, this chapter has warranted a lot of reactions, a lot of strong reactions towards Zoro. It really gets you thinking about the whole captain and vice captain dynamic. I know a lot of people don't buy into it, but it's pretty clear in my opinion, based on Vivarkar's statements as well as portrayal in the manga. And the latter of said dynamic, usually the Ben Beckmans and the Rayleighs, have kind of represented the moon in the partnership, the more intimidating, darker auras and personalities that contrast the lighthearted and adventurous captains very well. Zoro is usually the more intimidating force, even more so than Luffy. Luffy is the one who gets most of the attention and makes most of the headlines, but Zoro is usually the more intimidating force, and people often mistake him for the captain for this reason. And of course, the next quote by Zoro is what everybody's been talking about this weekend, probably the most polarizing discussions that we've had in the community this week, and it is of course Zoro's declaration to cut down Kaido. And honestly, at this point, I don't get how you can deny his significance and what it's going to be in the battle against Kaido. He's had all the hints, clues, foreshadowings, and nuances the entirety of the arc, but people were still questioning the motivation and his lack of outward intent to fight Kaido, but now you have it. It's as clear as it gets. A couple of times earlier in Onigashima, he kind of subtly hinted at the idea of fighting against Kaido, but this right here, this should be the nail in the coffin for those who thought that his anger and motivation lied in killing Orochi. Sure, at the time, during the Flower Capital scene, he was obviously enraged and attacked Orochi, but what has the story been telling you ever since then? That Orochi is fodder, that the real goal is Kaido. That's how you avenge Wano, that's how you avenge Yasui, is to kill Kaido. Oden arguably throughout his life had more reason to be angry at Orochi for all the times that he had screwed him over throughout his life. Shinobu even reiterated this exact same statement on Onigashima, that killing Orochi was pointless. Also, just think to yourself, how many times has Zoro even mentioned Orochi or thought of him during Onigashima? Zero. Zip. And if Orochi is still alive, at this point I see him being dealt with by probably Yamato or maybe Momonosuke, who has obviously Ame no Habakiri, the snake slaying sword. So if he's going to go down for good, it will be by that sword. Another interesting thing about this scene is actually when the earthquake started, Brook actually questioned Zoro if that was his Conqueror's Haki, and Zoro said no. So even though that wasn't Zoro using Conqueror's Haki, I'm pretty sure that Oda is foreshadowing it here, and that he'll likely have to use it or reveal it against somebody like Kin or Kaido. And speaking of Kin, I think this is the first time him and Zoro have actually been in the same vicinity, and Zoro just acknowledged that getting through either of these calamities to the top won't be easy. Now the funny part about this is that as soon as he states that he wishes he could just fly up to the top, Marco conveniently pulls up, asking if there's anything he can do to help them. So, what does this mean for the potential of the Kin fight? I have to admit that I believe it's in jeopardy of not happening with Zoro. I know I've been on the record to say that it will happen for sure, but I can't be 100% certain anymore. Let's look at the current motivations of the characters right now and kind of decide how this will go down. So, if Marco does in fact fly him to the top, Kin will for sure be there to intercept him. Like, that would absolutely happen. So, with Zoro being fully fixated on Kaido, it makes more sense for Marco, who knows that his role in this raid is just to support the others. It makes sense that given these circumstances, he would probably just hold off Kin and allow Zoro to get to the top, who doesn't really care about Kin, right? So, what could possibly happen to make Zoro's attention shift to Kin? Well, I think for one that if Marco somehow got distracted by somebody else who's very powerful, then that would obviously leave Zoro having to fight Kin because he's the strongest obstacle in the way of the rooftop. And two, I could possibly see Kin saying something to Zoro that either intrigues him and makes him want to fight or just interests him in his character. Whether that's something about his sword and swordsmanship, maybe he says something regarding the Shimotsuki samurai and it sounds familiar to Zoro, because there has been speculation that Kin might have been the ruler of Ringo, which was a Shimotsuki territory. We just saw Vinsmoke Judge be mentioned by Queen last chapter, and that kind of connects Sanji and Queen there, so maybe there's some sort of connection with Zoro and Kin, aside from just being badass swordsmen, that could narratively incline them to fight. There's also the fact that Kin himself requires a lot of exposition on his character regarding his race, so I can't really see that being done through a side character like Marco. Usually Oda has these antagonists be fleshed out through the main characters, kind of like Katakuri versus Luffy. So I think if he's planning to do that still, that would probably have to be done against Zoro in a fight. So whether Oda's plan is to have Zoro 1v1 against King and then join the Kaido fight late, or if Zoro's just going to go directly to the Kaido fight and go all out against Kaido from the jump, we'll have to wait and see. So at this point, the shaking continues and you see everybody's reaction to the island shaking. Some people thinking it's sinking, some people thinking that they won't be able to join the battle, such as Law's crew. And Onigashima is kind of just in madness right now. All the matches being set up, everything just going insane. And eventually this leads us to Yamato, who's trying to help Momonosuke escape currently. And she comments on Kaido's abilities. She says, dragons, they can generate flame clouds, which enable them to fly. She doesn't say Kaido's devil fruit ability. She says dragons, like the creature. So I think this is confirmation that Kaido is a homegrown natural dragon who's just able to shapeshift. I think that's just inevitable at this point, especially given the powers he's been using. All the elemental powers kind of reflect the Eastern Dragon's abilities in Chinese mythology. So I think it's pretty clear at this point that he does not have a dragon devil fruit. And of course we find out that the result of this shaking is Kaido using his flame clouds to fly Onigashima to the capital, man. And you know, like, I hate to be the guy who brings this up every single week, but man, like, you cannot tell me the Zoro killing Kaido evidence doesn't increase every single chapter, man. Like, we know this is going down in the Flower Capital. That's where Ryuma's legacy happened. I don't know if Oda plans to have Onigashima falling on the capital be like the environmental threat that he usually possesses in the arc that kind of puts the citizens in jeopardy, like the Noah on Fishman Island, like the sad ingredient on Punk Hazard that was storming the whole island, like the birdcage, like Big Mom chasing the Straw Hats. Like, this happens every single arc, so it's not a surprise that Oda would introduce this that puts the whole entire Wano Kuni at risk. And also at this point, it looks like the raid will not in fact fail. I was never really a supporter of that to begin with. I thought that was kind of impractical, but now it would just feel kind of ridiculous at this point to have all this setup, all these events happen, only for them to fail and recuperate like 120 chapters in, presumably is when the battle would end. That just does not seem practical to me at all. The Straw Hats and the Alliance right now are in it to win it. They are going to defeat Big Mom, defeat Kaido in front of the capital. Also have to comment on the alpha energy that Kaido's been exhibiting, man, because this guy has been raw during Onigashima and there's still so much potential with his character, man. That backstory is going to hit. There's still so many potential layers to his character that can be expanded upon and make him one of the best antagonists in One Piece. Overall, a very amazing chapter. We're getting closer to 1,000 and Oda seems to finally be picking up the pace a little more action. We're getting raw moments. We're finally getting some Zoro hype. This is a very, very exciting time to be a One Piece fan. The climax of Wano is going to be amazing. So let me know what you guys liked about this chapter and what you think potentially could happen in the next coming chapters. Do you think Act 3 will end before 1,000? Do you think we'll start to get some chapters away from Wano and then potentially resume with Act 4 and have all the matchups start? What do you guys think is going to happen? What do you think of this chapter? And most importantly, are y'all convinced that Zoro is killing Kaido now, man? Because it's just getting more and more clear every single chapter. But once again, appreciate you guys pulling up to my chapter review. I'm going to definitely start putting out more One Piece content on the regular. I've kind of figured out all the shit that I was dealing with. So we are back. I appreciate you guys. I'm Jagan, and I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace out.